Hey, Laura, welcome to Keep What You Earn.
Thank you for having me join you today.
Thank you for joining me. Now, could you just introduce yourself to everybody listening and let them know who you are?
Sure. I'm Laura Casselman. I'm the CEO of JV Zoo. I'm an entrepreneur as well and an author.
Perfect. What is the name of your book, by the way?
It's
So you can,
it's Trust Your Increments, How Small Consistent Steps Lead to Massive Success.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And tell me about what kind of got you started with your passion for what you do. Like, I always love hearing a little bit of the origin story because, when we're kids, these aren't part of the grand visions we have. So, like, where that transformation happened and how you developed your passion.
Absolutely. So I have a interesting career trajectory. I grew up in this super small town. I had three television channels. One of them, I saw the Rockettes dance in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and thought, that's what I'm going to do with my life. And so that was like my whole goal in life. And I did. I went to New York City. I auditioned and I started dancing with the Rockettes.
Wow.
But in my dance career, I realized that I was never going to retire and open a dance studio. That was not for me. And I started dual resumeing, climbing the corporate ladder while I was also dancing with the Rockettes. So that when I retired from the Rockettes, I stepped into my first executive role. And what I found is that I love running businesses. I love looking at the strategies behind businesses and behind running teams, which is probably my most passionate aspect of it is running the teams.
And what would you say? Why do you think that is in terms of running the teams? Like, what aspect of that or trait or skill does that like unlock for you?
So climbing the corporate ladder, I started taking note of things that I would do that I saw other people do that was great. But more than that, I saw a lot of people do things that I was like, I would never do that to my team. I would never treat a team member of mine that way. Those people view me as an employee that is dispensable. I will make sure that my team knows you were hired because you have this skill set that is needed here and I value you. And from there, I just realized that if I hired mature adults, if I treated them as such, and I didn't micromanage them, and also let them name their salaries based on the range that I had posted that was available, we would have a win-win situation.
I love that. And that's a very non-traditional approach, I would say, which is like name your salary. Can you unpack that for a little bit in terms of like why you started doing that and what results it generated in terms of how effective it was?
Yes. So, as a business operator at the top level, you know what your range is that you can afford. You know
Yeah.
what's expected for a position and the range that you want to hire within. So that goes into your job posting. But I never tell anyone, I don't care based on your experience, but mostly because I'm a female. And I came at this from a perspective of I was always the lower paid of the range, no matter how much experience and success I brought in. And no offense to any of the guys out there, it's not your fault. And I would accept the higher pay too if I were you. But a guy can graduate college and get offered the top of the range when a woman with 10 years experience and knowledge will get the bottom. So what I started doing was saying, here's the range, I'm posting it. And at the end of the interviews, when I knew I was going to hire them, saying, okay, you name your price range to me. What do you want to be paid? And of course, everyone's always like, what? But I say, you tell me, I posted the job range. You tell me what you want to be paid. Here's what you need to know. You're setting your bar. You're going to jump to that bar every single day.
That probably
Tell me
also
what you want
tells
to
you
be paid.
something about the person too.
Mhm.
It's almost an interview question in and of itself.
It is. And what I can tell you is consistently, women have been conditioned to undervalue themselves.
I mean, that's not surprising and it's disappointing still. Similar to you, I also had executive roles in corporations before I started my own business and I couldn't agree with you more on everything you're saying here. I had to hire people and I remember when I was a hiring manager for the first time the same thing. I said, "So we have a range of like what we're willing to pay them. This is what you're telling me to offer them." And they would never come back. They would never counter it. They would never negotiate. Most of them were women, wouldn't really negotiate with it. And it made me realize I'm just like, wow, like they're really like they just said no to an extra 10, $15,000 a year without even realizing they said no to it. But just by not speaking up and saying, hey, based on my research, it seems that the range probably is around here. It was really enlightening.
It is. What I have done is first of all, I'm an executive. I'm supposed to look at the bottom line. and the health of the company all the
Of
time.
course.
So when a female has named the lower end and she's at the top of her game, she's extremely qualified. She brings a wealth of knowledge that I know I need and I'm going to utilize fully. I accept her lowball range, saying we will revisit in 90 days and we'll see if you
Yes.
feel like you're being paid what you're worth. And they always say, okay. And I will say one time maybe a female has said that she didn't feel like she was being paid what she was worth. And I'm like, okay, let's have a sidebar conversation. And then basically I will give them the raise. I will then coach them into, here's how you need to go into this going forward.
Yeah. I like that proactive conversation too around it so that it's not like this silent resentment of I'm not getting paid enough and I'm just going to kind of tolerate it. No, I absolutely love that kind of culture shift. Now, I want to talk about kind of climbing the corporate ladder or building your business and how to do that successfully because I think there's also a misconception, mostly with women, I will say again, that you must make choices or that you must give up something along the way in order to be successful in business or in order to be successful in your career, that sacrifices must be made along the way. And I just want you to react to that and talk about how you view that approach to it.
Well, I'm a big believer in play the game until you can change the rules. And I
Mm,
certainly played the game of climbing the corporate ladder. It's how I got to where I am today. But I also believe, rather being the lady that blocks every other woman climbing up because she feels there's one seat at the table, that I don't block other women, that I welcome intelligent beings and know that there's always room at the table for anyone that can aid the progress of what the company's looking for or trying to achieve. So for me, yes, climbing the corporate ladder was tough. It was very tough. It was always that, take your seat at the table, but there was no one knew what to do afterwards. And everyone became super defensive of that one seat at the table. And I still hear women to this day talk about how, like in television, there's only one seat at the table for a woman, or in this industry, there's only one seat at the table for a woman. And it's up to that woman that's in that one seat to make room for the next woman. The right woman, not just any woman, the right one. So
totally.
that's the way I view it.
Yeah, I agree. They're reaching back and helping other women because there's also this kind of trend of competition too, in a
Yes.
weird way, because when there is that one seat, it feels like musical chairs. We have to fight for it.
And then
And I think
when
that's going to destroy us.
when we fight each other, we're being so silly. It's juvenile. I don't know why women don't have girl code. Guys have guy code. Women, we need to adopt girl code and realize that a win for one of us is a win for all of us and being paid properly. Getting that seat at the board is a win for all of us. And to stop feeling so defensive. I recently saw a lady that had this amazing PR campaign and I reached out to her. She was super friendly. I was complimenting her because I was genuinely impressed. And I asked who her PR company was, and she would not give me any information. And I'm like, I'm
Wow.
not competing with you. I would be their client too on another level. But she would not tell me. And I just thought, oh, how sad.
Not only that, though. So here's what I actually hear with that is that she's doing you a slight disservice. She's doing the PR company a disservice too by actually restricting them from getting new clients. So it's kind of that like hoarding, that scarcity in a way. And I think that we need to break out of that. And I wanted to talk to you too about, because that's almost a strategy, right? Like, 'cause there's different strategies to get to the top. One of them is try to climb over other people
Yes.
to raise your own self and stand on their shoulders, right? But then there's also like reaching your arm up and seeing if someone will help pull you up. All of these other analogies you can use. Let's talk about what are some of the strategies that have helped you be successful in climbing the corporate ladder or building a business, right? Like how you have utilized these. Cause I mean, I can relate to this entirely that you're playing the rules of the game. Well, what are the ways that you were winning? Like, what are the different tactics or strategies that you were using to win and how they served you?
Well, the first is that I stopped biting my tongue. Now, I don't mean
Mm,
that in be rude and be loud. I mean that I don't swallow it down anymore. Being Southern and being a female, I was raised, especially during the time I'm 44. So I was raised to, not speak until you're spoken to and to know your place. And that was a massive disservice in my career. There are so many times that people will just keep walking over you if you allow them. And also, people can't read your mind. If you don't voice what you need, if you don't voice that you need support in a project or that you need to be paid more, and here's why, you're never going to receive those things. There aren't as many people looking out for you as you want to believe. And they're not necessarily blocking you either. They just don't know. They think you're okay with everything. So stop being quiet, speak up when you need to. Don't be angry about it. Just say what you need. And that was one of the biggest changes for me, is just to say, I'm not going to be ashamed to say what I need. I'm not going to be ashamed when someone interrupts me in a meeting and says, I think what she's trying to say, if you'll just let me finish, I'll tell you what I'm trying to say.
I love
Simple
that.
things.
What are some of the ways, though, for someone who maybe is hesitant or that is very intimidating or overwhelming for them? Maybe some sentence starters or some ways to initiate those conversations that don't feel as aggressive or don't feel as pointed, where it's not because there's like this black and white assumption we have, all or nothing. That's like, I either stay quiet or I go full force into like dumping out all the honesty and being blunt as all hell. There is a happy professional medium but can you give us some examples perhaps of where that might actually show up?
Sure. So it's definitely per scenario. The
Of
biggest
course.
thing is being knowledgeable and equipped with information. When you have the information, you don't have to be on the defensive. You can simply put the information out there. So, starting in an interview, you already know what the job range pay is. So, doing your own research, or say you're underpaid, doing your own research with your skill set and your experience, you should know where you fall in that range. So, if you are underpaid and you are way below the range, it's okay to say, based on my research, the going rate for this is X. Based on my experience, I believe that I should be at the top of this level. You can start with conversations like that. If you're in a meeting and someone keeps interrupting you, it's okay to say, please stop interrupting me. I'd like to finish my sentence, or I'd like to complete my thought. That's not offensive. It's not being angry. And most of the time, other people will suddenly become aware you've been interrupted a lot, or you're correct. That person did just interrupt you. And that's not only rude, it's unprofessional. So the little things like that of just saying, here's where I am. This is the scenario I'm in. I have the information. And also, I'm going to not allow myself to be walked over. A lot of times I'll just put my hand up. I keep doing it while I'm talking on this as well. So for those who are watching with a video, I'll just put up my hand that gently says stop. Let's all stop for a minute. And now I'll say what I need to say. And people will listen. It's not offensive. People aren't offended. And a lot of times women come up to me afterwards saying, that really is a good way to handle things. And thank you for doing that in the meeting.
Yeah, I think all of it is in the subtleties. Even though we do need to be more than subtle sometimes, we have to just start with the expression of, I have something to say and I'd like to complete my thought. That it's so funny because for some people, they might feel like that is like, for me to say that is rude. And it's like, no, it's really not, because I feel like I'll use the, women, men scenario again and again. Like, again, it's not exclusively for this, but I've seen it a lot where I don't think men will ask for permission to speak as often as women will ask for permission to speak.
Mhm.
And I think that's just a trend that we convince ourselves, well, that's just the professional, polite thing to do. But I think we have these different standards of what is, appropriate in terms of being forward and appropriate in terms of being, reserved as well. And like what scenarios.
You're exactly correct with that. And I also think women apologize when we're
Yes.
not sorry. We've just been conditioned to say, I'm sorry. What we mean is thank you. Thank you for giving
Mm.
me your time today. Instead of, I'm sorry I took up so much of your time today. Or thank you for waiting on me while I fixed my camera. Not, I'm sorry, my camera didn't work today. And if we just get in the habit of practicing that, you'll find that it's easier and easier to do.
Yep. Guilty as charged.
I do it with my daughter. I
I do it all
realized
the time.
I recently said to my daughter, I'm sorry. And I was sorry because I moved and I kind of hit her. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And she said, that's okay, mommy. And I said, I just want to apologize. I want you to know mommy didn't mean that. And now she kind of has been going through this phase where she says, I'm so sorry. I just want to apologize. And I'm like, whoa, you don't have anything to apologize for right now. Just to make sure she knows already, we don't say I'm sorry when we're not. We say thank you or it's okay. I didn't get injured.
Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly how we should approach it. And I think that these small little shifts, right? These small little pattern recognitions, behaviors, Like it makes a huge difference. What are some tips you might have for, I think, that, like you said, we've been so conditioned that we may not recognize we're doing it. What are some ways that we could maybe bring that back to, a level of attention so that we can start working on those things and start having more of that presence that commands more respect and confidence?
I would pick one thing that you know you do. If you know you say I'm sorry, if you know you sit quietly when someone interrupts you, just pick one thing at a time to work on. And you can even start with I'm sorry at restaurants, because a lot of times women, while ordering, they'll want to swap something out and they're like, I'm so sorry. Do you mind doing this? It's a restaurant. They serve food. They're used to people changing their orders. It's totally fine to ask for what you need without apologizing and then to simply say thank you when they accommodate.
Love it. And I want to talk to you too about there's a lot of these different things we can do in real time. There's a lot of things we can do to react to situations. But I want to talk about strategizing and planning with an intention of what you want out of your career and crafting these things based on that, right? So let's talk about how to plan for your actual success, how to build your business, build your career intentionally, and zoom out for a second into how would someone start with kind of developing this strategy of how to build up their, whether it's their brand, their career, anything in their context using some of these types of strategies.
So I'm a massive planner. The moment you started talking about planning, I don't know if you realized I was smiling, grinning
Yeah.
from ear to ear. I love this. Planning is my thing. So I believe in making a plan because too many times entrepreneurs or people along, the climb of the corporate ladder don't know what they want and what the end goal is. You have to put some time into it and you have to know. And if you are not one of those people that knows where you want to be in 10 years or 5 years, that's okay. But you should know where you want to end this year. What is your goal for the next 12 months? Is it a promotion? Is it to make X amount of money? Is it to have your brand more well known than in this many homes? Is it to help 10,000 people? What is your goal for the next 12 months? And you start by writing it down. And I run tech companies. It's what I do, but I'm a big believer in pen to paper. There's also lots of research that proves the actual act of writing versus texting or typing is associated with more robust brain activity. So I'm big into getting into that old-fashioned pen to paper and writing it out. And then I detail out my plan. And this is how I run all my companies. I run multiple companies at a very large scale. I've done over $3 billion in revenue. That's not easy, but I make it as easy as possible by I write out the goals, break the goals into quarters. I break the quarters into 10 to 15 steps to hit that quarter, that milestone for the quarter. I know that those things have to be hit to reach the end goal. And then I break it down into daily steps that must be action. I don't write the daily steps out for Q4 and Q1. I write what I need to do tomorrow, today. That's it.
Yes. And I think having that connecting the daily tasks to a broader vision is absolutely critical, because if you're setting goals for habits without connecting it into the condition that will be the truth if these things happen, I feel like it's so much easier to dismiss them, to distract yourself from them, to make excuses as to why you can't do it. It's much like, like weight loss or fitness, right? It's, I have to go lift the weights today. Not just because I have to lift the weights today, because that was my goal for today, but because I want to reach XYZ fitness goal by XYZ time, right? You have to
Yes.
zoom out for a second and say, what is it all for?
And to that point, I'm a big believer in when you write out those goals, then make a roadmap with those milestones to that goal that's visual.
Yes.
And when it was just me, and it was just me by myself with my own personal goals, they were taped on the back of my door so that every time I walked out the door, I saw what is my goal. Even if I was just going to brunch with my girlfriends, I knew why I was in New York City and what my goals were for the time that I was there. But in a company, you write out those goals and you share them with your team. So everyone knows in 12 months, this is our final destination. We can get there early, but we cannot arrive late.
And let's talk about that for a second in terms of what entrepreneurs can do to help foster those goals, not just for the company, but then integrating the goals of their team into that.
Yes. So, like I said, big believer in hiring mature adults. So I don't micromanage at all, but I do say, these are the goals. These are the deadlines. And of course, deadlines aren't just the 365-day deadline, but these are the milestones. This may be your weekly by Friday, what's due. These are the things that you need to do to make sure your part is completed and the whole team wins. So I'm very clear on the expectations. My whole team knows if you need help, reach out. If there's a roadblock, let me know. I preach to my team. I cannot read your minds. I'm not in your home. I'm not behind your computer. You have to tell me. If I see someone's falling behind until they are completely conditioned to trust in that, I will constantly reach out. I will then be a kind of check-in person, but only like at the beginning, because I want them to be conditioned to know when you need help, you reach out immediately. You don't wait. You don't hope an answer magically appears. You reach out. After that, I let my team manage their days. I don't care if you have a doctor's appointment. Don't tell me. I don't care if your child has a ballet recital or a soccer game. I don't need to know. You know the deadline. And unless something tragic happens and it is you need to tell me you're going to be off work and extended it like days, don't tell me. Manage your life, manage your work order, get it done. That's it. Because I want my team to know I trust you. I respect you. Live your life.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then
And I recently hired a salaried employee, right? And one of the questions that came up was, how many vacation days do I have? And I drew a blank stare and I was like, none and all of them. And let me explain.
I
And
think
like, I actually, although raised in corporate, like born and raised corporate girl, I was like, this is a foreign concept to me now where I go, I don't care.
Yep.
And they're like, how many hours a week is this job? I go, enough to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get it done faster, you win, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
it's an interesting concept because I think this is something that is very foreign to a lot of corporate employees, especially those who go off on their own and dabble in entrepreneurship. It's very different to kind of change this paradigm of, well, results based working instead of just output and hours based working. I should say output over input, right?
Yep.
So as opposed to being measured on your work by its effort, you're measured on the results, the actual outcomes. And I said, well, if all your tasks for the week are done, I don't particularly care what hours you're working, when you're in. I mean, it'd be nice if it wasn't like you weren't nocturnal and I could actually DM you from time to time. But, other than that, do you. Like, I don't need to know if you're, just tell me if you're unavailable so I don't bother you. That's all.
I'm the same. And I love that about the way you run things. And I bet your team or the people that work with you also feel highly respected. I think if you're just starting and you're outsourcing for the first time or whatnot, you need to understand pay on completion of the project or set
Mhm.
milestones where there's a certain amount of pay that comes once that's done. That way, no one takes advantage of you. But other than that, it is a great working and respectful relationship to have.
Absolutely. I think it's also liberating for us as the owners too to know that like that's the mission, that we're all on the same mission, and if you want to get it done your way, you're free to do that so that I can open up the ways for you to be successful without like fixing you into my way of doing it, which I think is what makes it more hard to find, people that will align. But on that note, I want to talk about like you have this phrase saying that entrepreneurs should fire themselves every 90 days. And we were talking about this, and I was fascinated by that statement, like fire yourself every 90 days. Could you unpack for us what that means to you and why you say that?
Yes. And entrepreneurs and executives should do this.
Yes.
And the reason being is that if you find yourself doing a task more than one time, you should document it. Take the time right then and there, whether it's in a Google Drive, whatnot, document it and make sure that you write down each step of doing it. Yes, it's a pain, but it will become more useful than you can realize. Because in 90 days, if you find that you are still doing that same task, but it's documented, that means it is trainable to someone else and can be removed from your plate. Once you remove it from your plate, you free up your brain power and your time to focus on growing your business. If you're not focused on growing your business, more than likely, it isn't going to happen. And so many entrepreneurs just say, I don't have time. I have to do this. I have to do that. And that's because they never took the 5 to 10 minutes to document tasks. And now they've got 300 tasks that only take 5 to 10 minutes, but documenting all 300 would be overwhelming.
Yeah. I think people overestimate what we mean by document. Could you give like a simplified version of what documenting would mean and like how people could do that quickly?
So I have a Google Drive folder that I use for each company where it just has task for whatever the department is. Every task that we do in any company, all my team members have to do this and I do it myself. Right at the top of the page, what the task is, and then just 1, 2, 3, 4. And if it takes 12 steps, so be it. Don't overcomplicate it. If it is a complicated thing, maybe it's something that a developer has to do and they need to document it as well. Screenshot it. Screenshot the steps and just plug them right in. Make sure that you have one other person on your team do it, even if you're still doing the task frequently. One other person do it and find out if it's missing something in there that you might need to further explain, and then you're golden. Because if something happens where a team member is out for an extended amount of time, and we all saw this with the pandemic where people were out for extended amounts of time, someone else can just grab their folder, complete their daily task, nothing falls behind. It's so easy, and it is something that so many people forget. And the fire yourself every 90 days is just, hey, in 90 days, every 90 days, you should be reviewing. And for executives and the people leading the company, you need to offboard tasks.
Completely agree. And without even, like, we just had this conversation now, obviously, but I'm going to fill you in on a little bit of what we've been doing because actually this follows that. We, I guess, unintentionally, naturally it progressed this way, but it makes total sense that we hired some folks in. We realized that month one, because we have a lot of monthly recurring tasks, right? That's a very frequency to use for certain tasks. We have these monthly processes. So I did them month one, recorded myself doing them on Loom.
Yeah.
Then we transcribed it, created the steps, right? Thank you, ChatGPT. So now then it goes into month two. Okay, person below me, you go try using these tools and tell me where we get stuck, or let's figure out what goes sideways. If you use this recipe, what goes wrong? Then we refine it and we answer all the questions. And then month three, they're off to the races and they're like, I got it now. And I think that it's basically that 90-day cycle from introduction to getting into a rhythm and a groove with it to the point where you could at least teach it or delegate portions of it down and decide what portions you want to keep and hand off. And that goes not only for executives, but also manager level, or even if you want to elevate the team. I think a 90-day reset on the tasks is really healthy because I know that there are a lot of people listening who are in jobs right now that are bored or they're stagnant or they're just like, I'm not going anywhere. And I feel like that creates this forward momentum. Do you agree?
I do. And I love that you're doing this. And I also think, too, when people do want to grow, it's an easy way to say, okay, take these and run with them. Let me know where you get stuck. Because it's a good way for people to measure, are they ready? But for you to also see and know, is this an easy coachable thing or are they just not ready?
I also find it difficult personally, based on my skill set, to develop SOPs in a sense from scratch, from a blank canvas and go, what are the steps? And I'm like, I don't know. I just muscle memory. I don't like if I have to unpack what I'm doing, it's very difficult for me to put that on paper. But if I follow along and I show the video, right,
Yeah.
then somebody's going to ask me questions and I'm going to go, great question. I didn't think to anticipate that. So I'm going to clarify that in the next round, the next draft of edits. And I think that the questions are so clarifying. If you enable people to ask questions and to probe the process and say, tell me where this is broken without attaching ego and without attaching any sort of like, right and wrong. And someone saying, hey, well, what if we did it this way instead? I think I have a better way. I feel like that is the ultimate in creating a really good process.
I agree. And I love that you use technology to help you. This is not technology replacing a human. This is technology and assisting a human.
Yeah. And I believe the technology part of it is play to your strengths, but leverage it for the weaknesses. Like leverage it for the areas where it can help boost the strength so that you're not. I mean, to be honest with you, Laura, it's like if that word wasn't around, I would take forever to document my stuff because it would be such a chore to be like, oh, I have to go do that thing. I have to go write all my steps down. I don't want to do it. It's annoying. And I would back burner it forever and know that it's important, but it would never be urgent to me. But
Yeah.
because we have that help, we can actually do it.
Yes. And I go into my notes app and I do voice to text a lot while I'm driving because I've got
Amazing.
time in the car where I want to document something, but I can't be texting and I don't want to write. And then all I have to do is clean it up and, where autocorrect stepped in, it didn't understand some acronym I was using. And I just go in and clean it up.
Yeah. And how do you recommend folks manage the team in terms of implementing? Let's say they take away some of these ideas from today's episode. They want to go implement and they want to go make everyone more successful using these little incremental steps, right? These little things you can do. How would you recommend kind of bringing a team on board? Do you recommend actually being transparent and saying, these are things we're trying to implement? Or do you recommend doing them somewhat in silence and just doing them and letting the actions speak for themselves? Or do you actually disclose, like, this is an effort I'm consciously trying to make?
I disclose. And the reason that I do it is because I don't count vacation days or sick days either. But I want my team to know if you need for your self, care, if you need to take an extended weekend, you can do that and you're not going to be penalized. And one of the things that we do is we say, hey, if you are going to be out for an extended amount of time, you need to have a team member cover you. So if that process is documented, it's easy to say, hey, will you look through my tasks? Are you okay to take these on while I take a week with my family on vacation and I really just don't want to log in? My team's super about it because they understand it's a trade-off. If you are not transparent, what I fear is that people think they're asking me to document because they're going to let me go. Then you're going to have a lot of mistakes. If you have to let someone go, you should already have things documented so far in advance that this isn't even a question or a concern. Did you do it for those reasons?
Yeah, and to add on to that, right? If something isn't documented, but you're letting someone go, I always ask, well, did you enable them to be successful if you didn't document anything?
Right. That is such a good way to look at things.
Yeah, it's like, well, we don't have anything documented. Like, maybe that's the problem.
Exactly. And then, for entrepreneurs, for owners, if you want to sell your company and you don't have your processes documented, ooh, I fear for
Amen.
you when you go to sell how hard it would be to pass off your company, but also how long you would have to sign to stay and work as an employee of the company that you owned and ran for however long, which hurts people's egos. It does. It hurt mine.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. To build a sellable business, you have to have the recipes included. It's like having a restaurant, but then not disclosing the recipes to all the food. It's like, well, then how do you expect us to cook everything the same way?
That's right. And it doesn't have to be a pretty process. Like you said, we can use Google Docs, whatever works for you. And if someone buys your company and wants to make it these pretty SOPs that they hand out, great. They can go and do that. But then they've got the information that they need in order to do
Yeah. It's all about function over fancy. As I always say, it's like, is it working?
that.
I love it. Do you have any other tips for our entrepreneurs and executives listening who just really want to unlock their next level of success? And, maybe they've been inspired by something you said today, or they just want to feel like they're heading in the right direction. What advice would you offer them?
I would say you need to work consistently. And so many times, entrepreneurs, we're all over the place. And so I'm a big believer that quantum leaps don't need to happen. We don't have to go from 0 to 10 million overnight, or from 10 million to 150 million. Everybody got so onto the 10x, 10x, 10x. Take a moment and know that small, consistent steps will lead to success. You just have to show up for yourself each day.
100% agree with you. Time is your friend. And I always say that I recently said this to a group, and I fundamentally believe it, that a lot of people do find success quickly, right? You see those examples of people just skyrocketing, and I say they're learning the same lessons just with higher stakes.
And to piggyback on exactly what you said, I have been on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies in America multiple times.
Hmm.
I can't tell you how many times I've been to that event, and the people that were on the list last year, their company doesn't exist this year.
Ah, very interesting. Yeah, it's not always about the speed of the trajectory. I think it's really about the long-term stability, lasting results, and something that's sustainable and, like you said, sellable. I always say if you want to have the choice, to be able to sell the business if you wanted to, or to build something that's packageable and sustainable, I would choose that any day of the week and play the long game. So I totally agree. Laura, thank you so much for joining me today. Really great conversation. Where can people find out more about working with you or learning more from you?
My website, lauracasselman.com. You can also find me on Instagram, the Laura Casselman. You and I talked about this earlier, but you can DM me, send me a message, a question, ask for how you can work with me. Super responsive. I will respond.
We'll make sure that all of that is in the show notes, guys. We'll be sharing a lot of content from Laura coming up. And definitely shoot her a DM. If you had any takeaways from today's show, do us a favor, post this little screenshot of your phone to your stories, tag me, tag Laura, and let us know anything you took away. I know there's got to be something because Laura was full of golden nuggets of information today. So make sure that you're tagging us and giving your biggest takeaway there on Instagram. Thank you again, Laura, so much.
Thank you.